She thought she could disappear in the middle seat of a crowded red-eye flight. A worn hoodie pulled low, eyes heavy with years of sleepless nights, Naomi Walker looked like any other weary traveler, just another face among strangers. But sometimes, the stories we try hardest to hide are the very ones destiny refuses to let go. In the hush of the cabin, with whispers of prejudice brushing against her like an unwelcome draft, Naomi longed only for silence. She wanted rest, nothing more. Yet the world had other plans. Because before the night was over, the quiet woman everyone overlooked would be the only voice strong enough to rise above fear, injustice, and the shadows of her past. This is not just a story about a flight through the night sky. It is a story about courage, about dignity in the face of racism, and about how, even when the world tries to erase you, justice always finds a way. Naomi Walker chose seat 32B for a reason. She wanted the middle seat, the one most travelers groaned at, the one squeezed between a chatty grandmother and an overworked businessman. It was the perfect place to vanish. She pulled her hoodie low over her forehead, hugged her small backpack tight to her chest, and exhaled as the hum of the aircraft settled into her bones. She had practiced invisibility for years. It was safer that way. The grandmother beside her smelled of perfume and nostalgia, flipping through a paperback romance novel. "First time to London, dear?" she asked, leaning close with an eager smile. Naomi answered softly, "No, ma'am, just tired." Polite, distant, and enough to close the door without slamming it. The businessman on her right barely glanced up, fingers hammering on his keyboard as though his life depended on the emails he sent before takeoff. For them, Naomi was nobody. And for Naomi, that was exactly what she needed, nobody. But invisibility is fragile. It shatters under the smallest pressure, and Naomi felt the sting almost instantly. A man across the aisle leaned toward the flight attendant. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Excuse me, do I really have to sit here, next to her?" His eyes flicked toward Naomi, sharp with disdain, his words laced with something colder than simple discomfort. The attendant hesitated, her professional smile faltering. She whispered, "I'll see if I can adjust." Naomi heard every word. She kept her hood down, her eyes half closed, her breath steady, but inside her chest something twisted. It was not the first time. Not the first sideways glance, not the first seat avoided, not the first invisible knife of prejudice disguised as preference. She had worn a uniform once, flown missions that most of these passengers could never imagine, and yet here she was unwelcome even in an economy seat. The grandmother beside her bristled. "She's perfectly fine," she said to the flight attendant, her voice sharp. "You leave her right where she is." For a moment, Naomi almost smiled, but she stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that speaking up often made things worse. Sometimes silence was survival. Still, silence can be its own violence. And in that moment, Naomi felt the clash between two truths, the safety of staying small and the dignity of standing tall. That tension was her constant companion. The flight continued boarding. Families shepherded children into seats. Soldiers in uniform trudged down the aisle, carrying invisible weights heavier than their duffels. A man in sunglasses and a hood pulled low stumbled into row 38, his bag unusually heavy for something so ordinary. Naomi noticed, but she forced her gaze away. Observing without reacting had been her skill for years. Blending in, surviving. Captain Reynolds gave his practiced welcome over the intercom, his voice steady and reassuring. Passengers settled into routines, adjusting air vents, tugging seat belts, and checking phones before airplane mode silenced the world below. For a few minutes, it was peace, the simple, predictable rhythm of human travel. But peace never lasts. Not for Naomi. The aircraft jolted slightly as a thud echoed from the cargo hold. The attendant smiled too quickly. Just a bag shifting, nothing to worry about. Naomi knew better. The cargo didn't slam that hard during taxi. She tucked the observation away, a quiet note in her mental log. Her hands twitched slightly inside her hoodie pocket, fingers curling as though remembering the feel of a control stick, the rhythm of combat breathing. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Naomi closed her eyes, pretending to sleep. But her body was awake, tuned, every nerve on alert. She could sense the angle of climb, the subtle power shifts, the air currents brushing the fuselage. Years of training don't vanish. They wait beneath the skin, like embers that flare when the wind finds them. And then, The moment that shattered everything, the captain's voice came again. Not calm this time, but tight, fragile around the edges. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some irregularities on our radar. I need to ask, a pause, heavy, impossible. Is there anyone on board with fighter pilot experience? The cabin froze. The grandmother clutched her book tighter. The businessman's fingers hovered mid-air above his keyboard. People turned to each other in confusion, fear threading through the air. An unknown aircraft was shadowing them in the night sky. A predator circling. Naomi did not move. Not yet. The grandmother's eyes darted to her, suspicion mingling with hope. The man across the aisle sneered, muttering, "Don't look at her. What would she know?" The words dripped with dismissal, that reflexive prejudice that carved people into categories, who could be trusted, who could not. Naomi breathed in deeply. She remembered another cockpit, another night sky, another moment when orders clashed with conscience, and her refusal had cost her everything. She had chosen dignity over obedience, and the system had punished her for it. That choice haunted her, yet it was the choice that still defined her. Now the question rose again, only louder, crueler, in front of 200 strangers. Would she stay silent and safe? Or would she risk stepping into the open, exposing herself once more to judgment, suspicion, and the old wound of racism? A little boy's voice broke the silence. "Mom, there's another plane out there. I can see it." His mother hushed him, but the truth was already alive in the cabin. Fear multiplied, pressing down on everyone like the weight of gravity itself. Naomi opened her eyes fully for the first time that night. She straightened in her seat, her posture no longer slouched but sharpened, as if invisible strings pulled her upright. The grandmother gasped softly, recognizing something in her eyes: steel, resolve, the quiet storm of someone who had once carried the sky on her shoulders. This was the beginning, the first spark in a night that would test not only Naomi's skill but the very core of who she was. A woman overlooked, underestimated, doubted because of the color of her skin, about to step into the light where prejudice would try to erase her, and courage would refuse to let it. And so, the lesson began, right there in seat 32B. Injustice often arrives quietly, disguised as a neighbor's complaint, a stranger's sneer, a system's hesitation. But when injustice grows into danger, it demands a choice, silence or courage. Naomi Walker was about to choose, and her choice would decide the fate of everyone on Flight 447. And as fear spread through the cabin like wildfire, Naomi knew the time for hiding was over. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, signaling rest. But rest was far from anyone's reach. Fear had crept in quietly, threading through the rows of seats like invisible smoke. Naomi sat still, her hood no longer drawn over her face. Her eyes were open now, scanning, calculating, her mind sharper than the flicker of instruments she had once mastered thousands of feet higher, in cockpits built for war. The captain's words lingered in the air. "Is there anyone on board with fighter pilot experience?" It was a plea cloaked in formality, but the tremor beneath betrayed the truth. Whoever was out there in the dark sky was not flying harmlessly. Passengers began whispering. "Maybe it's military training," one man muttered. Another replied nervously, "They wouldn't train this close to a civilian flight." Panic was building, not yet screams, but sharp breaths and darting eyes. Naomi shifted slightly, as though preparing to rise, but she was interrupted. The businessman on her right, David, finally pulled his eyes from his laptop. He looked at her with skepticism, his tone cutting. "Don't even think about it. Let the crew handle this. They know what they're doing." His words weren't about safety, they were about her. His eyes lingered on her skin, his jaw set in dismissal. Naomi felt the sting, but she kept her voice calm. "Sometimes the crew needs help." "Not from you," David snapped, his voice louder now, drawing attention. A few passengers turned to look. Some nodded unconsciously, the bias so ingrained they didn't even notice it passing through them like a reflex. The grandmother, Margaret, bristled again. "Leave her alone," she said sharply. "You don't know who she is." David scoffed. "I don't need to. I can tell she's not who we want flying this plane." His words struck like cold steel, slicing through Naomi's composure. But before Naomi could respond, the aircraft lurched violently. Drinks spilled, bags shifted in the overhead bins, and children cried out. Passengers grabbed their armrests as the plane dipped, then steadied. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Naomi's body reacted instinctively. Feet braced, shoulders relaxed, breathing measured. Not fear, but readiness. There was no turbulence. This was a wake vortex air disturbed by another aircraft flying dangerously close. She could feel it in the pattern of the roll, the rhythm of the jolt. Whoever was tailing them was making their presence known. The intercom crackled. Captain Reynolds again, this time without his practiced calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing some irregularities. Flight attendants, take your seats." His voice faltered on the word irregularities. It was the kind of vague language pilots used when they were trying not to cause panic. But for Naomi, it was confirmation. She looked across the aisle. A boy, no more than 10, pressed his face to the window, tugging on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, there's another plane out there, really close." His mother tried to hush him, but Naomi knew he wasn't imagining it. Children noticed what adults dismissed. Naomi's heart tightened. She had seen this dance before, an aggressor circling, probing, waiting for the right moment. She wanted to stand, to step into the aisle and declare what she knew. But she hesitated, weighed down not by doubt in her skills, but by the weight of others' disbelief. Would they trust her? Or would prejudice blind them until it was too late? Her hesitation ended when she noticed the man in 38 Farads. He had been quiet since boarding, hidden behind sunglasses despite the darkened cabin. Now his hands trembled as he pulled his bag from under the seat, clutching it close. Sweat glistened on his brow. He whispered to himself in a language Naomi couldn't catch. His fear wasn't the normal fear of turbulence. It was the fear of someone who knew exactly what was happening. Naomi's instincts sharpened. This man was connected. He wasn't just another nervous passenger. She rose halfway from her seat, but David grabbed her arm. "Sit down," he barked. "Don't make things worse." His grip was tight, forceful, as if holding her down was protecting everyone else. Around them, others watched, unsure whether to intervene or support his restraint. For a moment, Naomi felt the crushing weight of every time her voice had been silenced, every moment when her expertise was doubted because of the skin she wore. She could almost hear the echoes of her discharge hearing years ago, the dismissive tones, the veiled accusations. But this was not the time for silence. She pulled her arm free, her voice low but steady. "If I don't stand now, none of us will make it." The grandmother placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder. "Go, child. Do what you have to do." Naomi nodded and stepped into the aisle. All eyes followed her, whispers flaring like sparks in the dark. Some curious, some hopeful, many doubtful, but she walked forward, toward the cockpit, toward the captain who had asked the question nobody else could answer. As she moved, the intercom buzzed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are being shadowed by an unidentified aircraft. It is not responding to communications. We are attempting to establish contact." A pause. "Please remain calm." The cabin erupted in nervous chatter. Some cried, some prayed, and one voice rose above them all, angry, distrustful. David again. "You're letting her go up there? Are you insane?" Naomi turned back, locking eyes with him. For the first time, she spoke not in whispers, not in avoidance, but with the authority of someone who had led in skies he could never comprehend. "I've flown missions you couldn't survive 1 second of. You don't have to trust me, but if you want to live, you'll let me do what I was trained to do." The cabin fell silent. Even David lowered his gaze, though the bitterness in his eyes remained. Naomi reached the cockpit door. The flight attendant, Jennifer, blocked her path at first. "Passengers aren't allowed." But Naomi cut her off, her voice calm but firm. "Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Walker, United States Air Force, F-22 pilot. I'm your only chance." Jennifer froze, eyes widening as the weight of Naomi's words settled. She stepped aside. Naomi pressed her hand against the cockpit door. The hum of the engines filled her ears. The tension in the cabin pressed like a storm. And outside, unseen in the night sky, danger circled closer. She knew this was only the beginning. And as the door opened, revealing the worried eyes of Captain Reynolds, Naomi Walker crossed the threshold from invisibility into destiny. This was no longer about hiding. It was about survival. And survival would demand every ounce of courage she had left. Captain Reynolds' eyes carried years of weathered skies. But tonight they carried something else, fear he was trying hard to disguise. Beside him, the first officer stiffened as the second Naomi stepped through. He masked it as procedure, as protocol, yet the edge in his tone was unmistakable. "Ma'am, This is a restricted area. Naomi didn't bristle. She met his gaze with steady warmth that asked for nothing and surrendered nothing. I understand. Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Walker, United States Air Force former. I heard your call. You've got a shadow you can't identify and wake patterns that don't make sense for commercial traffic. You need time and options. She slid the words in as softly as a lullaby and as clean as a checklist. Reynolds studied her, then tipped his chin toward the scope. We keep getting a contact just off our starboard quarter. No transponder, no response on guard, then gone. His calm cracked a little. And our cabin is tense. Tense was a generous word for a place where fear had started assigning blame by skin tone. Naomi stepped closer to the instruments, breathing in the familiar scent of warm electronics and scrubbed air. You tried guard on 1, 2, 1, 5? She asked. And when Reynolds nodded, she said, key 3 seconds. Release. Then 2 quick taps. Don't speak. Anyone trained will hear the distress pattern. The first officer's jaw flexed. That's not in the manual. Neither is what's outside your window, she replied, not unkindly. Reynolds keyed the signal. The cockpit hummed. Silence answered. Naomi's ears tuned to that silence, to the way absence of sound can carry meaning. Somewhere behind it, she felt another presence, the space where a voice should have been. She held that thought and pivoted to the heart of what she'd seen in the cabin. There's a man in 38 Farads, she said. Sunglasses in the dark, white-knuckle grip on a bag that's heavier than it should be. He's scared of something specific. If your shadow is hunting, 38 Farads is the reason. The first officer folded his arms, a guard posted across his chest. We're not roughing up passengers based on vibes. Neither am I, Naomi said. I'm telling you the pattern. When danger circles, it circles a target. Reynolds glanced at the alt tape, at the tremble in the needles that shouldn't be trembling in such smooth air. If you're right, how do we play it? 5 minutes, she said. Minutes save lives. Keep our profile stable, no sudden altitude changes. Make small course corrections, enough to force the tail to work. And I'll talk to 38 Farads quietly. Not as a threat, as an exit. The first officer, Peterson, his name tag red, clicked his pen once, the sound a small shot. You think you can just walk the aisle and interview suspects? I think I can walk the aisle and reassure a human being, Naomi said, softer. And in the process, find the truth. His mouth tightened. We don't know you. We don't know if you're even who you say you are. For all we know. Reynolds cut in, decisive. Allen. A pause that held rank without shouting it. We asked for a fighter pilot. One came. He turned to Naomi. You go. I'll keep the ride smooth. Naomi nodded and reached for the door. One more thing, she added, voice lowered. If the shadow calls, let me talk. If it's who I think, he'll respond to my voice. And who do you think it is? Reynolds asked. A flicker of memory crossed her face. Sand, a night horizon, an order she refused, the sound of a friend breaking in her headset. She did not hand the past to the present. Someone who taught me how to win and forgot how to be worthy of it. In the aisle again, the cabin felt smaller, voices louder now that people had tasted the word unidentified. Fear shrank rooms and enlarged monsters. Naomi walked with a rhythm that steadied as it moved, palms visible, eyes kind. She checked a seatbelt here, passed a tissue there, and complimented a little girl's braids. Calm can be contagious when it refuses to be performative. She reached row 38 and knelt, careful to lower herself not to loom. The man in sunglasses flinched. Close up, his fear tremored so hard it made the air around him blur. I'm Naomi, she said. I'm going to say something that sounds strange. You are not the only one on this plane who is afraid, but I think you're the only one who knows why. His throat worked. He held the bag tighter. Up close, she could see the calluses on his fingers, the red press marks from straps. Leave me alone, he whispered, accent slicing the words at their edges. Eastern Europe, she placed it, not out of suspicion but human mapping. I will if that keeps everyone safe, Naomi answered. But looking at the sky right now, that won't. So I need the smallest truth you can give me. He shook his head. You can't help me. No one can. Someone already has, she said, tipping her head toward the cockpit. The pilots didn't descend when told. That means we still have choices. Help me make a good one. He dragged a hand across his jaw. His sunglasses slipped, and she saw his eyes bloodshot, hunted. If I speak, they kill us all. If you don't speak, Naomi replied, heartbeat steady in her voice. They still might. Silence doesn't bargain with wolves. He stared at her, measuring something ancient whether he could trust the person the world had taught him not to. He searched her face for trick wires, for performance. He found instead a tired, patient gravity. I carry codes, he said at last, so quietly she felt the words more than heard them. Not money, not drugs, not, I carry access. They want it. Naomi's chest tightened around a recognition she wished she didn't have. Satellite? She asked. He blinked. Yes. Thank you, she whispered, and he exhaled like someone whose lungs had been held shut. What's your name? Victor, he said, and when she smiled, he flinched again, as if even kindness might be a trap. I didn't want any of this. They said only the courier. No danger. Plane ticket, that's all. You were lied to, Naomi said gently. But we're not done. She tapped the bag with one finger. Can those codes be broken? Can they be dirtied? He frowned in confusion. Made to look clean but fail after they're used? His eyes sharpened. Yes. A checksum delay. It will pass the first test. Then start, she said, quietly. If they board us or pull us down, I want their prize to melt in their hands. Across the aisle, the businessman David had been watching, jaw clenched, eyes bright with a different kind of fear. What is she whispering to him? He asked no one and everyone. Why is she talking to him? The accusation was ready-made, a frame built long before this night. He looked at Naomi and saw not a rescuer but a risk to be managed. Margaret, the grandmother, met his stare with a spine she'd grown raising sons who learned the cost of speaking up. She's saving your life and you can't stop yourself from doubting her because you don't like the mirror her face holds up to yours. David swallowed a retort. Anger and shame warred in the angle of his shoulders. The intercom crackled. Reynolds' voice, but this time with a burr of interference radio jamming, brushing their frequencies. Walker, if you can hear me, we're getting... Static sliced his words. Then another voice took the channel, smooth and cold, threaded with history. Flight 447, it said. Maintain heading and prepare to descend to 180. Comply and no one gets hurt. Naomi straightened, and for a heartbeat, she forgot the cabin, the eyes, the judgment. She was back in a desert sky, a wingtip close as a brother. She lifted a handset from the wall unit, toggled to guard, and let the steadiness in her spread outward. Gray Wing Flight, she said. This is Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Walker. Marcus, don't do this. Breath returned to the cabin as a whisper. A few passengers looked around, uncertain whether they had misheard. The channel held its breath, then a laugh came, familiar and broken. Vixen, the voice said, using the old call sign he'd once thrown at her in grinning admiration. I thought that was you stalking my moves. Standing between you and your worst self is not stalking, she replied. Back off. You're flying a bus, he said. You can't maneuver. You can't fight. The only play here is to listen. I'm listening, Naomi said. To your right shoulder, complaining when you pull 6 Gs. The whole grief burned in you 5 years ago. To the lie you've told yourself so long, it sounds like truth. She could feel the entire cabin lean into her words, even if they didn't understand the language of pilots. What they heard was a human chord, 2 people who used to trust each other and now stood on opposite sides of a chasm named choice. Marcus clicked his mic twice, acknowledgement and annoyance. Don't make this personal. It already is, she said softly. You chose a plane full of strangers to punish a past that can't answer back. He paused. When he spoke again, ice replaced the weary warmth. Descend. 180. 2 minutes. Naomi thumbed the transmit off and turned to Victor. Work faster, she whispered. To Margaret. If anyone asks what I told him, tell them the truth. I asked for help. Then she faced the aisle, her voice just large enough to carry. We're going to feel some bumps. It's not the end of the world. It's the sky reminding us it can be rough and still hold us. In the cockpit, Reynolds' hands hovered over the thrust levers, waiting for a cue he couldn't get from a book. In the cabin, 100 judgments rumbled under 100 skins. At seat 32B, an old story curled up like a snake who gets believed, who gets blamed, who gets to be the hero. Naomi held all of it and breathed. Lesson for tonight, she said, more to the plane than the people. Bias wants to make us small when we need to be brave. Bravery starts with listening to the person our fear tells us to ignore. She picked up the intercom again and let her voice calm the air. Captain, hold altitude. I'm going to buy you minutes. Then to the shadow circling beyond the window. Marcus, if you want a conversation, come have one with me. But if you touch this plane again, you don't get what you came for. The channel clicked, empty for now, but not for long. She looked down at Victor's shaking hands, steadying as he typed, at Margaret's thin fingers wrapped around her rosary of courage, at David's knuckles loosening as understanding wrestled with pride. The cabin had become a mirror. In it, the oldest battle in the world stared back fear versus dignity, prejudice versus trust. Outside, the night gathered its next move. Inside, Naomi took hers. And as she turned toward the cockpit again, the story shifted from being about who she was allowed to be to who she refused not to be. The threat did not arrive with a shout. It arrived with a small, decisive sound, the click of a lavatory lock opening, the whisper of feet too sure of themselves. 2 rows behind, where Naomi had knelt with Victor, a woman stood and moved without the hesitations of fear. Her hair was tucked under a beanie, her face forgettable by design. In her right hand, a strip of metal gleamed, sharpened from something torn out of the airplane's bodywork, a weapon born from the very machine meant to carry them home. "Don't move," she said, voice flat as a winter field. She held the blade out not wildly, not theatrically, but with the competence of someone who had rehearsed. Her eyes found Naomi first, then flicked to Victor. "You. Bag." The aisle gathered into one tight breath. Flight attendants froze, trained hands remembering procedures that didn't cover this exact shape of danger. The soldiers spread through the cabin, earlier boys in their 20s, wearing fatigue in their posture, tensed but stayed seated, unarmed by rules and reality. Naomi raised both palms, empty, her body language a soft blanket laid over a lit fuse. "We don't want anyone hurt," she said. "Let's slow this down." The woman's mouth twitched. "You don't get to slow anything. Codes. Now." Victor shrank, clutching the bag to his ribs. "Please." "Stop talking," the woman snapped. "Or I start choosing examples." Her eyes drifted and landed like so many eyes did on a young black mother across the aisle. 2 children pressed into her side, their braids beaded with tiny stars. Prejudice had a grim muscle memory. It reached first for those who'd been reached for before. "Stand up," the woman told the mother. "Bring the kids." The mother's breath hitched. She did not stand. Naomi stepped into the aisle's center of gravity, drawing the woman's focus back. "You go for them, you lose me. You go for me, you lose the codes." She took one slow step. "Your best move is to keep your options open, which means nobody bleeds." The woman's blade hovered. "You think I won't?" "I think you're a professional," Naomi said gently. "Professionals finish missions. They don't make noise, they don't have to." She kept her eyes on the woman's face, not the metal. "You weren't supposed to show yet. Your partner outside got impatient." A flicker there and gone. "Partner?" Naomi tilted her head, listening to the air, to the hum that had turned slightly toothy with a wake their eyes could not quite see. 2 aircraft, staggered. You were waiting for us to descend. You open the door at 10,000. They board or they force us down. It's a good plan if we cooperate with it. A breath. We won't." She edged closer, speaking softly enough that those nearest leaned in without meaning to. "I know you have people. I know someone promised you safety if you did this. But I also know the man leading them. He breaks who he touches. He will break you next." A voice from the speakers cut in, threaded with static and something like amusement. "Careful, vixen," Marcus drawled. "You're telling my secrets." Naomi didn't glance up. "You already did." She kept her gaze on the woman's eyes, where a flicker of doubt had just lit. "What did they say they'd do for your family?" she asked. "New names? New country? Money?" The woman's jaw hardened in a way that answered without words. "And what happens if I tell them you failed?" Naomi continued, soft as gauze. "Do you think men who threaten children keep promises to mothers?" The blade wavered. "I don't have a choice." "You do," Naomi said. "It's just expensive." Silence gathered like a jury. The soldiers rose half an inch, then sat again as the blade lifted. The young black mother folded her children in tighter and whispered a prayer into their hair. David half stood, half sat in indecision. Shame from minutes ago battling a new urge to be useful. Margaret clutched her paperback like a talisman and stared the intruder down with grandmother ferocity, the kind that had seen whole families through storms. "Okay," Naomi said, easing one step nearer, hands still up. Compromise. You keep the blade. Victor keeps the bag. We sit. We talk. The woman looked around as if the walls might whisper advice. They didn't. They only offered their chorus of engine and air. Sit, Naomi repeated, offering dignity as a bridge. Let me be the one who failed Marcus. He'll believe that. He's wanted it for 5 years. The woman's eyes sharpened at the name, calculation running its fingers through her options. You know him? Naomi nodded once. I know who he was, and I know who you are right now. A person who does not have to be a weapon. For a heartbeat, something like a plea flickered through the woman's expression. Then a shout cracked from the back. Crawford, the retired cop, moving before he fully meant to, years of training answering fear with action. The woman whipped toward the sound, the blade's edge catching the overhead glow. Naomi didn't think. She moved. Her left hand caught the woman's wrist, her right hand her elbow, and she turned the blade inward to the empty air, not toward flesh. The move was small, efficient, and designed to end momentum rather than punish it. The weapon clattered onto the carpet and slid beneath a seat. Crawford completed the tackle, pinning the woman with a grunt that sounded like an apology. The cabin exhaled in a ragged cheer that wasn't really joy, just relief given a voice. Naomi crouched, catching the woman's eyes where they stared up, wild with anger and fear and a grief nobody had asked about. I won't let them hurt your family, Naomi said. It was not a promise a person could make alone. It was a promise a system owed, and she intended to make the system say it out loud. Jennifer and another attendant arrived with plastic restraints, hands shaking but precise. As they cuffed the woman, Naomi angled her body to shield her from hungry stares. She's human, Naomi said to the aisle. Look at her that way. A few heads bowed, a few didn't. The speaker crackled again, Marcus's voice gone flat. That was unwise. Naomi stood, voice low and steady. What's unwise is thinking you can frighten people into giving you the future. I taught you better than that. Descend, he said, the word a command this time, stripped of banter. Or I start putting holes in your pretty aluminum tube. Naomi gestured to Jennifer. Brace demonstration. Now. The attendants moved down the aisle, voices measured, showing strangers how to make their bodies smaller in the safest possible way. The act itself steadied the room, doing something always did. She lifted the intercom. Captain, on my mark, we're going to shed speed fast. Prepare to retract immediately on call. To the cabin, she said in a voice that soothed and sharpened at once, you're going to feel the plane slow hard. It will feel wrong. It isn't. It's us choosing our own sky. She counted silently with the engines, with the ghosting wake of the jets outside, with the math of triangles only pilots and birds think in. Now. Reynolds popped the speed brakes and dropped the gear. Drag bloomed like a parachute. The plane shuddered, the nose pitching as alarms peeped, not screams, just cautioners. Outside, something blurred past the cockpit windows in a streak that made stomachs clench the hunter overshooting when the prey refused to play by script. Gear up, boards in, power, Naomi called, and felt the engines deepen, felt the long body gather itself and surge. Children cried and were hushed. Adults cursed and were forgiven by the moment. Naomi's calves shook not from fear, but from the effort of holding 100 people's panic inside her bones without letting it grow teeth. When the shutter settled into a new hum, she picked up the cabin mic again. Small lesson, she said, letting the words land like hands on shoulders. Fear will always tell you to obey the loudest voice. Wisdom listens to the truest one. Sometimes that voice comes from a person you didn't expect to lead. She set the mic down and looked to Victor, who was typing like a pianist playing for a burning room. Almost done, he breathed. They won't know until it's too late. Good, she said, and meant it about more than code. Behind them, Crawford eased the restrained woman into an empty row. He crouched, old knees protesting, and asked quietly, "What's your name?" It took her a moment. Then she whispered, "Anna." He nodded. "Okay, Anna. Breathe. This isn't your last chapter." Naomi felt something in the cabin shift just a degree, like the adjustment a pilot makes to correct drift. People had seen a black woman step into the storm and not make it about glory or force. She had made it about keeping them all alive. Some hearts recalibrated. Not all. Enough. Static fluttered, then Reynolds' voice arrived clean. "Walker, we have 2 bogies now, and fuel is a concern." "Understood," she said. "Keep climbing in ragged steps. Make them burn with us. She lifted the radio to guard again. Marcus, she said, tenderly as someone who still believed in the boy who used to sing badly under his breath in pre-flight. This ends in one of two places, either in a courtroom where you can finally tell the truth, or in a sky where you make yourself into the thing you swore you were fighting. Don't pick the sky. Stop preaching, he said, but his breathing had changed. Naomi returned the handset to its cradle and turned to the aisle that had become a river of stories. A mother teaching courage by staying, a grandmother teaching courage by speaking, a man learning courage by unlearning pride, a courier learning courage by choosing sabotage over silence, an accomplice learning courage by not doubling down on harm. Next, she murmured to herself, as much a prayer as a plan. We string minutes together until they become an hour. And as she moved back toward the cockpit to trade for more sky, the story reached its next bend, where machines and biases and choices all braided into one narrow passage. What came after required more than skill. It required belief in a woman too often told to sit down, and in a cabin learning, seat by seat, how to stand up. Naomi stood at the threshold of the cockpit once more, the buzz of the instruments filling her ears like an old hymn. Captain Reynolds' hands trembled faintly on the yoke, a vibration he tried to mask with clipped words. They're tightening the box around us, he said. Fuel burn is rising. We can't keep dancing forever. The first officer, Peterson, muttered, We shouldn't even be listening to her. We're risking our license, our careers. Naomi cut him a look that was not sharp but solid, like a stone weathered by storms. You're risking more than that if you think rules matter to people willing to kill hundreds in the dark. The radio crackled again, and Marcus's voice returned, carrying a rough warmth that made Naomi's chest ache with memory. Vixen, you always did like stalling, but time runs out. 2 minutes, then we clip your wings. His words weren't shouted, they didn't need to be. They slithered, calm and venomous, through the airwaves. Reynolds swallowed. He sounds like he means it. Naomi shook her head. He wants me to hear his power. If he wanted to strike, he would have. He's buying his own minutes, same as us. She pressed the transmit button. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt the weight of 100 eyes watching her silhouette. Marcus, you remember Kandahar. You remember the night we were told to drop on that village. No verification. You followed orders. I refused. 17 civilians died. Her throat tightened, but she kept going. And you decided the only way to live with yourself was to blame me. You're still flying that night, Marcus. You never landed. The silence that followed was long enough for passengers to shift nervously, long enough for Victor's keystrokes to echo like gunshots in the cabin. Then Marcus laughed, hollow, bitter. And you think they would have honored you if you had obeyed? They never did. They gave the medals to men who looked like me, not you. You got the discharge. You think that was an accident? The truth cut deeper than any insult. Even Reynolds flinched. Peterson looked away, shame crawling across his face. Marcus had named the wound Naomi had carried alone. Racism had clipped her wings long before his threat ever could. Naomi's voice softened, a gentle tide against his rage. I know. They punished me for saying no. But the difference, Marcus, is that I didn't punish strangers for what they did to me. She let her words linger, hoping to pierce the armor he had built from anger and betrayal. For a moment, the radio stayed quiet. Then, faintly, You always thought you were better than me. Naomi exhaled slowly. No, Marcus. I always thought you could be better than this. In the cabin, David shifted uncomfortably, his earlier sneer replaced by unease. He had doubted her every step, but now he was listening, truly listening, and for the first time the contempt in his eyes wavered. Margaret squeezed his wrist. You hearing it now, son? What she's fighting isn't just him, it's the same thing you've been feeding. Victor finally looked up, sweat gleaming on his forehead. I've dirtied the codes, he whispered. Checksum will fail after activation. It's the best I can do. Naomi knelt, took his hand, and steadied it. That's enough. You've taken their weapon and turned it to ash. Now you need to be ready to testify. His eyes widened with fear. Testify? They'll kill me before I land. Naomi's gaze softened. Not if we land together. The cabin rattled violently, a roar of engines screaming past their right side. A jet had just performed a knife-edge pass, close enough for passengers to see its underbelly in the moonlight. Screams erupted, and children cried. The mother of two pressed their face into her chest, whispering prayers. Peterson cursed under his breath. That was a warning. Naomi shook her head, steel in her voice. No, that was a temper tantrum. He wants us afraid. She grabbed the mic again. Marcus, you almost took their wingtip off. Getting sloppy. That's not you. A pause. His voice came back, quieter. Don't push me. She closed her eyes. Then stop letting the past push you. The lesson of the moment wrapped itself around the cabin like a sermon no one had expected. Racism and guilt had poisoned Marcus until he weaponized them against strangers. And Naomi, forced for years to shrink, to endure, to be invisible, was now the only one who could stand tall enough to call him back from the abyss. To the passengers, it was more than survival. It was a revelation that prejudice, if left unchallenged, could turn a soldier into a mercenary, a comrade into a threat, a man into a ghost chasing old shadows. Reynolds spoke quietly, almost reverently. What now? Naomi answered. Now we wait for his choice. And we make ours regardless. She turned back to the cabin, to the frightened faces, to Margaret's defiance, to David's conflicted stare, to Victor's trembling hands. Lesson tonight, she said, loud enough for all to hear. Hate wants to convince us it is stronger than humanity. But hate can't land a plane. Hate can't protect children. Hate can only destroy itself. The engines roared again outside. Marcus had not decided. But Naomi had. She would not let his wound become their grave. She would carry them all through the storm, even if the storm was made of a man she once called brother. And as she gripped the back of the captain's chair, she whispered to herself the words that would guide her through every minute to come. Justice always finds a way. The cabin of Flight 447 had become a theater of whispers and racing heartbeats. The hum of the engines was no longer background comfort, but the trembling percussion of fear. Naomi Walker stood in the aisle, steady as a mast in a storm, though every nerve in her body vibrated with the tension of choices yet to be made. Marcus's jet still hovered outside, its wing lights flickering like the eyes of a predator pacing just beyond the firelight. The second hostile craft lagged farther back, holding position with unnerving precision. Naomi knew what it meant. Marcus was pressing close, threatening directly, while his partner remained the net, the final snare if she tried to maneuver. She addressed the cabin with the same quiet authority she'd once used in a cockpit briefing. Listen to me. What you're feeling right now, the shaking, the cold, the weight in your chest, that's fear. And fear is real, but it's not in charge. Courage is. The grandmother nodded firmly, pressing her hands over her book as if it were scripture. The soldiers, scattered through the cabin, straightened in their seats. Even the businessman, David, found himself leaning forward, caught despite himself in the gravity of her words. But fear is persistent. It doesn't vanish because one person says so. It finds new cracks to creep through, and in row 38, it became something sharper. The accomplice woman, Anna, tied to her seat with zip ties, began to shout, "You're all fools. You think she can save you? Look at her. They won't even believe her when you land. They'll believe the men with the jets, not the woman in the hoodie." Her words cut like broken glass. Naomi turned slowly, her eyes locking on Anna's with a calm that seemed impossible in the storm. "That's what hate always says," Naomi replied evenly. "That no one will believe. That no one will listen. That's how it keeps winning. But tonight, it's outnumbered." A murmur spread among the passengers, quiet nods, subtle shifts of loyalty. For the first time, Naomi wasn't standing alone. The cockpit door opened, and Reynolds motioned her forward. "We've got something," he whispered urgently. She stepped inside, the glow of the instruments painting his face in harsh green. Peterson pointed to the radar. "New contacts. Fast movers. Closing from the northwest." Naomi's pulse quickened. She pressed her face closer to the display. Contrails, faint lines visible even at night confirmed it. NATO fighters. Help was finally on the way. But Marcus saw them too. His voice broke through the radio, jagged with fury. "You think cavalry will save you? No, Vixen. No medals this time. I'll end it before they arrive." The cabin shook violently as Marcus performed a low, aggressive pass. Oxygen masks dropped again, swinging like pale nooses. Screams erupted, a child wailed, luggage thumped loose from overhead bins. A cup of coffee spilled across the floor, rolling like dark blood between the seats. That was the breaking point. Panic surged like a living thing, passengers clawing for masks, mothers clutching children, the carefully held fabric of order tearing apart. Jennifer, the flight attendant, tried to shout instructions, but her voice drowned in chaos. Naomi moved. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She simply walked the aisle with a purpose that cut through the noise. She reached for a fallen child, lifted her back into her seat, and buckled the belt. She guided an elderly couple into the brace position, whispering comfort. Every action was small, but the ripple spread. Passengers began copying her calm, imitating her steadiness. Fear hadn't left, but it had been given shape, given direction. Back in the cockpit, Reynolds stared at Naomi with awe. "How is she doing that?" he muttered. Peterson whispered, "She's not flying the plane. She's flying the people." Naomi returned to the cockpit, her face pale but resolute. "We don't have long. Marcus is desperate. That makes him dangerous, but it also makes him sloppy. He'll push too hard." She glanced at the fuel gauge. "And he can't keep burning like this. He's running low." The radio crackled again. Marcus's voice, raw, almost pleading. "Naomi, don't make me do this. Hand over the codes. Walk away alive." Naomi's throat tightened. For a moment, she heard not the mercenary but the young wingman she once trusted with her life. The man who used to joke in the mess hall, who once gave her his last ration pack in the desert. She closed her eyes. "Marcus," she said softly, "you don't need the codes. You need forgiveness. But you won't find it at the end of a gun. You'll find it the moment you choose to stop." The silence afterward felt infinite. Outside, his jet hung steady, caught between two paths, redemption or ruin. In the cabin, Victor tapped furiously at his tablet. "Done," he shouted. "The codes are corrupted. They won't work. Even if they take them, it's worthless." Relief rippled through the passengers, but Naomi knew better. Marcus wouldn't know the difference until it was too late. He would still fight, still try to win by force. She leaned close to Reynolds. "Prepare for evasive. When I give the signal, gear down, speed brakes full. We'll dump speed, force an overshoot. The NATO fighters will be here in minutes. We just have to buy time." Reynolds swallowed hard, nodded. Peterson whispered, "This is insane." Naomi looked at him, calm as stone. "So is staying alive." Back in the cabin, Margaret whispered to the businessman, "David, see her now? This is what strength looks like. And you doubted her because of her skin." David's face flushed with shame, his jaw clenched. He wanted to protest, but the truth pinned him silent. The cabin lights flickered as Marcus's jet roared past again. Naomi braced herself, feeling the weight of 200 souls pressing invisibly on her shoulders. This was the breaking point not just for Marcus, not just for her, but for everyone on board. The place where silence either killed or gave way to courage. And in that fragile balance, Naomi Walker stood unshaken, ready to prove that even in the darkest skies, light could still break through. The air inside Flight 447 felt thinner now, every breath carrying the weight of fear. Naomi Walker stood braced against the cockpit door, her hand resting lightly on the frame as though touching the heartbeat of the plane itself. The passengers behind her had settled into a brittle silence. Even the children had stopped crying, their wide eyes fixed on the windows where death seemed to circle with blinking lights. Outside, Marcus's jet clung dangerously close, its silhouette a black shadow against the stars. The second aircraft, more distant but steady, hovered like a wolf waiting for its cue. Naomi studied them both with the practiced precision of a fighter pilot who had spent years learning to read intentions from nothing but formation and angle. "He's setting a trap," she murmured. Reynolds leaned toward her, his jaw clenched. "Explain," she pointed. "The lead Marcus is the distraction. Aggressive passes, noise, threats. He's drawing all our attention. But the wingman, the second aircraft, that one hasn't deviated once. Perfect distance, perfect angle. It's waiting. They want us to react. Make an evasive maneuver that will send us straight into the kill box." Reynolds swore under his breath. Peterson muttered, "This is suicide. We can't fight jets with a passenger plane." Naomi turned on him, her voice firm but calm. "We don't fight them. We outthink them. And Marcus has a weakness." She tapped her temple. "Ego. He wants me to see him. He wants to prove he's still the better pilot. That's where we strike." The radio crackled, Marcus's voice dripping venom. "Still hiding behind civilians, Vixen? You always were good at protecting others, even when it meant losing yourself. Here's your last chance. Descend to 15,000. Hand over the package, or I start carving pieces off your flying bus." The passengers heard it. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Panic clawed its way back into trembling fingers. Jennifer's voice tried to steady them, but fear has sharp claws. Naomi lifted the mic. Marcus, you were never this reckless. You're pushing too close, burning too much fuel. You're bluffing. She let the words hang, then quieter just for him. Or are you hurting again? That shoulder of yours? Can you still pull 9 Gs without screaming? The silence on the other end was heavy, raw. She had hit her mark. Then a growl. You think you still know me? You don't. Not anymore. But Naomi knew. She'd seen the flicker in his turns, the half-second hesitation on his rolls, the injury he never admitted, the pain he hid. That was her opening. She turned back to Reynolds. When I give the order, deploy speed brakes. Drop the gear. Hard. It'll shake us like hell but force an overshoot. Marcus will try to compensate, but his wingman, the one in the trap position, he'll break formation. He's not disciplined enough to hold it under turbulence. Reynolds hesitated. Passengers won't be ready. Naomi's eyes hardened. Then we get them ready. She grabbed the intercom, her voice carrying through the cabin like a lifeline. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Naomi Walker. In a few moments, this aircraft will make sudden movements. It will feel violent, but it is necessary to keep us safe. Put on your seatbelts. Hold your children. Keep your heads down. Trust me. Margaret, the grandmother, echoed her words to those around her. Trust her. Do what she says. Soldiers moved through the aisles, checking belts, steadying hands. Even David, the businessman who had once sneered, helped a frightened teenager secure her straps. Fear was still there, but now it was laced with something stronger unity. Naomi nodded to Reynolds. On my mark. She leaned into the mic again. Marcus, remember what you taught me? Always make your enemy think you're weaker than you are. She waited, counted the rhythm of his movements, the distance closing. Now. Reynolds yanked the levers. The aircraft shuddered violently, alarms screaming as gear dropped and speed brakes flared. Passengers screamed, pressed into their belts. Coffee cups and tablets flew through the air. For a sickening second, it felt as though the 777 would rip apart. Outside, Marcus's jet shot past, too fast to compensate, his turn sloppy, jagged. The second jet, caught off guard, wavered, struggling to maintain its trap position, just as Naomi predicted. Gear up! Powerful! She shouted. Reynolds slammed the throttles forward, the engines howling as the aircraft clawed back speed. The sudden maneuver had bought them precious minutes. The NATO fighters were closer now, faint contrails streaking the sky. But victory never comes easy. The radio hissed with Marcus's furious voice. Clever, always clever. But you think this ends with tricks? No, Naomi. This ends with truth. His jet pulled back into view, but this time he wasn't posturing. He was locking weapons. In the cabin, Victor gasped, clutching his tablet. They're trying another access attempt. The drones, they had backups. They're trying to override remotely again. Crawford, the ex-cop, barked. Then kill it. Shut it down. Victor's hands trembled. If I shut it all down, I lose the corrupted shield. They'll know the codes are fake. Naomi heard every word, stabbing her with urgency. She grabbed the mic again. Marcus, listen to me. You fire on us, and everything you came for dies with us. Victor already triggered a failsafe. The codes are gone. Another silence. Then, almost broken, you're lying. Naomi closed her eyes. No, Marcus, I'm saving you. Because if you fire, you'll have killed children this time with no war to hide behind. You'll be nothing but a murderer, and you'll never forgive yourself. The cabin was silent. 200 lives hung in a pause, on a man's pride battling his guilt. And then the miracle. Marcus's jet wavered, dipped slightly. Not away, not yet, but faltering. The passengers exhaled as though they had all been holding breath for hours. Naomi opened her eyes. This is your last chance, Marcus. Don't prove them right about us. Prove them wrong. The lesson was clear to every soul aboard. Prejudice had made Naomi invisible, unworthy, disposable in the eyes of strangers. But here, in the fire of crisis, it was her voice, her defiance that was holding the line between life and death. The trap was breaking. But Naomi knew. The final reckoning was still ahead. The first rays of dawn split the horizon, streaking the Atlantic sky with fire and gold. To the passengers of Flight 447, The light felt both holy and cruel holy, because it pierced the nightmare darkness that had swallowed them, cruel because the danger was far from over. Naomi stood in the cockpit doorway, her body taut with exhaustion but her eyes unwavering. Marcus's jet floated just ahead, its silhouette etched in flame against the sunrise. The second jet circled farther out, waiting for its cue. And then, in the growing light, everyone could finally see them clearly, the predators that had stalked them for hours. Gasps rippled through the cabin as faces pressed against windows. "They're so close," someone whispered. "Too close." Naomi grabbed the intercom. "Listen to me. This is the moment they want you to panic. Don't give them that. Stay seated. Stay calm. Look at the sunrise. Remember what you have to live for." The words spread like balm over raw nerves. Mothers pulled their children closer, passengers closed their eyes, and for one trembling moment, the fear softened into something steadier, resolve. But the radio shattered that fragile peace. Marcus's voice filled the cockpit, louder than ever, jagged with fury. "Naomi Walker, you've always made yourself the savior, always stood in judgment. Well, here's your judgment day. Hand over the courier and the codes or watch them all burn." Reynolds' hands clenched on the yoke. Peterson muttered, "We can't stall him anymore. We're sitting ducks." Naomi raised her hand. "We don't stall him. We face him." She pressed the transmit button. Her voice flowed steadily, almost gently. "Marcus, everyone is listening. 200 souls, soldiers, mothers, children, strangers all hearing you. Do you want them to remember you as the pilot who murdered families in the sky? Or as the man who chose differently at the last breath?" The silence that followed stretched long. Too long. In the cabin, panic began to stir again. Victor whispered, "He's locking systems. I can feel it. Someone's trying to force an override again." Crawford moved closer, his ex-cop instincts sharp. "Then do what you did before. Jam them. Delay them." Victor's hands shook. "I can't. They're stronger now. They know the codes are corrupted. They're desperate." Naomi's mind raced. Then, suddenly, the radio erupted not with Marcus, but with another voice. Cold, mechanical, a woman's accent, clipped and sharp. "Flight 447. Comply immediately. Descend to 15,000 feet or be destroyed." The second jet. The silent partner had finally spoken. Naomi's blood chilled. This wasn't just Marcus's ego anymore. This was the organization Grey Wing tightening its grip. Marcus was the hammer, but this woman was the chain. Naomi pressed the mic. "You can force us down, but the codes are already useless. He failed. You failed. End it now before NATO rips you out of the sky." A harsh laugh crackled through. "You think NATO protects you? You think Washington will hail you a hero? You're a disgraced officer, a black woman who broke the rules. They will blame you. They always do. And we will vanish while they strip you of honor again." The words cut deeper than bullets. Even Reynolds flinched. The cabin heard it too, every syllable dripping with the old poison Naomi knew too well. Racism disguised as truth. "They'll never believe you," the voice sneered. "When they look at you, they see weakness, not salvation." The passengers erupted in protest. Margaret shouted from her seat, her voice shaking but fierce. "We believe her. She's the reason we're alive." Soldiers echoed. "Aye, ma'am," Crawford called. "You've got a whole plane backing you." Even David, shame burning his cheeks, stood halfway in the aisle. "You're wrong," he said loudly. "She's the only one we trust." The cabin united in a chorus of voices. Fear and prejudice cracked like glass under the weight of solidarity. Naomi felt the surge of their belief press into her chest. For years, she had been invisible, doubted, and erased. But here, now, in the crucible of fire and sky, they saw her. Naomi pressed the mic again. Her voice rang like steel. "Did you hear that? 200 witnesses. They'll tell the world what happened here. You can smear my name, but not theirs. And you can't erase the truth." The second pilot hesitated, her silence louder than her threats. Marcus's voice cut in again, but it was different now, ragged, weary. "Naomi, stop. Just stop." For a heartbeat, Naomi heard the boy she once flew beside, the soldier who laughed in desert camps, who dreamed of honor. "Marcus," she whispered, "you still have a choice." The cockpit went still. The jets outside held their deadly formation. NATO fighters streaked closer, contrails now visible on the horizon. Marcus broke the silence. His voice was quiet, stripped bare. "Vixen, I can't undo the past, but maybe I can end this." His jet banked slightly, pulling away from the nose of Flight 447. The second jet roared in protest, the woman's voice shouting, "Hold position! Do not break!" But Marcus ignored her. Naomi's breath caught. The trap was breaking not by her hands alone, but by his. The lesson carved itself into the hearts of everyone aboard. Racism and betrayal could twist loyalty into hate, could strip away humanity. But even in the ashes, choice remained. Even a fallen soldier could step back from the abyss. As Marcus's jet peeled farther away, Naomi whispered into the mic, "Come home, Marcus." And for the first time that night, hope felt real. Relief had begun to seep into the cabin like sunlight through a cracked door. Passengers loosened their grips on armrests. Parents whispered reassurances to their children, and even Captain Reynolds allowed his shoulders to drop for the first time in hours. Marcus had pulled away. The second jet lingered, but its silence suggested hesitation. NATO contrails streaked closer on the horizon. For a moment, survival seemed possible. Then came the sound, a metallic clang against the fuselage. Then another, and another. The cabin froze. Heads turned as screams erupted from the back rows. "Something's on the wing!" a man shouted, his voice breaking. Passengers pressed to windows, eyes wide with horror. Crawling across the skin of the aircraft were spider-like drones, four-legged machines the size of dinner plates, clamping down with mechanical precision. Their thin antennae sparked faint blue light as they scuttled toward maintenance ports along the fuselage. Naomi's blood ran cold. Drones. Autonomous boarding units. Marcus didn't come alone, he planted these. Victor's tablet flickered violently in his hands. "They're probing for access. If they connect, they can override navigation, even engines. We'll lose control." His voice rose with panic. "They're trying to steer us down." Chaos surged through the cabin. Mothers screamed, children cried, and passengers clawed at their seatbelts as if they could escape. Jennifer tried to restore order, but her trembling voice cracked. Naomi grabbed the intercom. Her tone was calm, cutting through the noise like a steady drumbeat. "Listen to me. These drones cannot kill us outright. They are machines looking for access points. They feed on panic. So give them nothing. Sit down, hold still, and breathe." Her command spread. Soldiers jumped to their feet, coordinating with Jennifer. "Everyone, brace positions. Stay low. Eyes on me," Naomi ordered. The passengers obeyed, clinging to her voice as their lifeline. "In the cockpit," Reynolds swore. "They're already trying to reroute us, headings shifting by degrees." Peterson's face glistened with sweat. "We're losing control." Naomi's mind raced. Pressure changes, heat, turbulence, every trick she knew from survival training. "Captain, cycle the outflow valves. Create pressure pulses. It might shake them loose." The cabin buckled as sudden bursts of air rattled through. Passengers groaned, clutching their ears as pain spiked in their skulls. Two drones tumbled away, spinning into the slipstream. But two remained, one clinging stubbornly near the wing root, its legs locking tight. Crawford, the ex-cop, shouted from the aisle. "Heat! Use the ovens, coffee makers, anything! Create hotspots on the skin!" Jennifer snapped into motion, activating every galley appliance. The cabin grew hotter, sweat beading on foreheads. Outside, metal warped faintly under expanding heat. One drone lost grip, tumbling away. But the last held fast, its antenna plunging into a sensor port. Victor cried out, "It's in! It's talking to the systems, forcing a reroute to Wales." Naomi's stomach clenched. Wales, a remote airfield perfect for an ambush. Marcus's contingency plan. She seized the mic to the NATO fighters, now minutes away. "We need wake turbulence. Right over our wing route. Precision pass." Colonel Harrison's voice answered, steady. "That's suicide, Walker. At this speed, you'll tear your plane apart." Naomi's jaw set. "Less suicide than letting that thing take us. Trust me." Moments later, an F-15 roared overhead, its engines screaming as it dove close. "Bank left, 15 degrees now," Naomi commanded. Reynolds obeyed, the 777 groaning under the strain. Wake vortices slammed into the fuselage. The last drone tore free, spinning violently into the void. The cabin erupted in cheers, but Naomi held up her hand. "Not yet. Stay calm, stay ready." Victor confirmed, breathless. "Systems restored. They're gone. We're clear." But Naomi knew better. Marcus always had one more card. Shannon Airport appeared on the horizon, its runways gleaming in the early morning light. Emergency vehicles lined the tarmac, lights flashing, a silent promise of safety. Passengers wept with relief, holding one another. Naomi stood steady in the aisle, though her body screamed with exhaustion. Her duty was not finished. As they descended, the radio crackled once more. Marcus's voice ragged, broken. "Naomi, I'm on the ground, surrounded. It's over. I'm transmitting kill codes for the drones, and the names of everyone in Grey Wing. They'll know the truth." His voice faltered. "Tell them. I'm sorry." Naomi closed her eyes. Forgiveness was not simple, but for the first time, she believed he meant it. The 777 touched down smoothly, tires screeching against Irish soil. The cabin burst into applause, tears, and embraces. Strangers who had entered the night as individuals left it as family. Authorities stormed the plane, securing Victor's corrupted tablet, arresting Anna, and tending to the passengers. Colonel Harrison boarded, saluting Naomi with pride. "Outstanding work, Colonel." She shook her head. "Not Colonel, just Naomi." But Harrison smiled. "Not anymore. Washington wants you back, with full honors, and a new doctrine, the Walker Protocol, civilian and military, working together. No more silos, no more cover-ups." Naomi glanced back at the passengers, Margaret clutching her notebook, Crawford nodding with respect, the soldiers standing guard, even without weapons. David, bowing his head in shame, turned gratitude. "If we do this," she said softly, "it's for them. For every soul who put their faith in me when no one else would." The Anderson twins ran to her, hugging her legs. "Are you a superhero?" Emma asked. Naomi knelt, smiling through tears. "No, I'm just someone who chose to do the right thing. And so did all of you." The lesson was etched into every heart aboard. Prejudice had made Naomi invisible, but courage had made her undeniable. Racism had sought to erase her, but unity had amplified her voice. Injustice had stalked them in the night sky, but justice landed with them in the dawn. As the sun rose higher, painting the runway gold, Naomi Walker finally allowed herself to rest. She had not only saved 200 lives, she had reclaimed her own. And somewhere, in the silence between jet engines and human voices, the world shifted. A black woman, once doubted, dismissed, and erased, had become the guardian of the sky, the proof that even in the darkest night, the light of justice always finds a way. As the wheels of Flight 447 kissed the runway and the dawn washed the sky in gold, the story of Naomi Walker was no longer just about one woman who rose from invisibility. It was about every soul who sat on that aircraft, passengers who found courage in their fear, a grandmother who defended dignity with her words, soldiers who stood ready without weapons, a courier who chose truth over silence, and a disgraced pilot who turned her past pain into present strength. This was never only a story of jets and codes, of threats and maneuvers in the sky. It was the story of how prejudice, when left unchecked, can shadow every part of life even 30,000 feet above the earth. And it was also the story of how unity, trust, and courage can break that shadow apart. Naomi Walker reminded us that being overlooked does not mean being powerless. That silence can be a shield, but sometimes silence must give way to a voice strong enough to guide hundreds through the storm. She showed us that redemption is not about erasing mistakes, but about choosing differently when it matters most. And so, as the passengers stepped off the plane, they carried more than relief. They carried a truth they would share for the rest of their lives, that courage is contagious, that justice is possible, and that even when racism tries to erase someone's worth, humanity can lift that person higher than hate ever imagined. If you've listened this far, let Naomi's story be more than a tale of survival. Let it be a call to see those who are invisible, to hear those who are silenced, and to stand together when fear tries to divide us. Because in the sky, we are all connected. In danger, we are all family. And in courage, we are all capable of flight. Thank you for joining me in this journey. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of justice, courage, and the fight against prejudice. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the smallest seat on the plane carries the greatest strength of all.